Oh, Kimmy, we've talked franchising before, so we're going to put that to the side. This time we're talking your book. What drove you to write it? Give me the backdrop on it. That's probably a good opening place.
Yeah. So thank you for having me again. I wrote the book because I mentor. I sit on the board of governors for the College of Charleston Business School, and I'm very passionate about helping young people sort out what they want to do with their lives and just help guide them a little bit. So I speak a lot about this, and I get the same questions. I was getting sort of the same questions over and over. Mostly people were kind of curious about. I moved to Charleston 10 years ago at 45 and started a whole new career. Just I didn't know any people, didn't have any friends here, didn't know anybody here. I mean, brand new life basically. And so people are very curious about that, as it turns out. And so I would get the same questions over and over and over again from people, and especially students would ask the same types of questions. So I decided to write the book as sort of, and I call it a project because it really is meant to be. It's not meant to be a very complicated Pulitzer Prize winning novel here. It's just meant to be a simple project to help sort of apply a little framework and strategy to what you'd like to do with your life.
Are you talking to yourself in the book? Are you reflecting backwards on your life? Is that where that starts?
Yes, it does. I speak about it. Each chapter is sort of, it's funny that we're on a podcast because as I wrote it, I sort of thought of each chapter as sort of its own little podcast, even though I don't have a podcast. But I kind of thought about it in that way in case I was ever speaking, on a particular subject. So each chapter is sort of broken out in a way that I sort of reflect on why I feel the way I feel. There are quotes in there. I love quotes. I think they're a great way to sort of just always refocus your attention when you kind of think about a quote in your mind. And so I wrote it in a way that it's, I give a little bit of personal anecdotes and then also suggest ways for you to have a little bit of homework at the end of each chapter.
So, okay, so you're reflecting backwards as you build this out, but you're also advising people to
That's right.
figure things out. Ultimately, what are you trying to help them figure out?
So in the book, I have something that I've trademarked called your future funnel.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do in the book is I take the reader through the future funnel, and the funnel is designed, each level of the funnel works you through a part of your life. For example, the first one is desires, and then it's aversions. So we want to begin to ask good questions, very targeted, and then we want to, as you go through the funnel, you're sort of designing your life.
So ultimately, young or old, I don't know that it matters age based, but are people cross applying your 7 steps to personal? Are they doing it to business? Are they chasing happiness? Are they chasing wealth? Does it matter?
Well, the reason why it's called the Passion and Purpose Project is because the idea is that, in my mind, the goal in life is to have both passion and purpose, and then also to leave a lasting legacy. So the purpose of the funnel and the 7 steps is really to guide you through, but to have you really be reflective, because at the end, the last is legacy. So to begin thinking at a younger age how you want to leave this world, what legacy do you want to leave? And that could be as simple as I talk in the book about, setting up a trust, maybe even just making sure your will is in place. It could be very simple. I've had people email me from Italy and say, I read your book. I bought a house. I'm not moving back. And, I don't know that that's really the prescription, but the goal is for you to think about your life the same way you might plan a vacation. Like, have intention to your life. Don't just get on the treadmill of life and just be like, I work, I vacation, I work, I vacation, or I work and I go home or live for Saturday night or whatever. The idea is that we put intention into what we do with our lives, and that we really give some thought to it.
My perception is, if I reflect backwards on myself, like I started our business at 27, but the 27-year-old version of me, some things I got right, some I was learning, getting wrong. But if I really reflect, did I have the capacity to think through the bigger picture, the way that you're speaking to this, I probably have the capacity, but I couldn't see the shortness of life at that point. Do you
Sure,
think
sure. And
person,
yeah,
they struggle with, like, they hear you in theory, and every young person can listen to folks that have been through life in a different way, but is there still like a missing component of the recipe for someone that's younger?
well, I think for any of us, what I like to say sometimes is you don't have to know the destination. You don't have to know every exit or roadblock that's going to happen. But I suggest that it's worthwhile to get in the right lane, right? So just get in the right lane. For example, somebody might say, I really want to own a restaurant. And okay, that's my passion. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, so you love accounting and you love working weekends and evenings and having people complain a lot. And they're like, no, I don't want to do that. I just love to cook. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about that, right? Do you really want to own a restaurant or do you want to be a chef? So to answer your question more succinctly, I think you don't have to know. I always say change is good, change is necessary, pivot, pivot, pivot. We always have to be ready to pivot. But I think we can get in the general vicinity of what our passion and purpose is. And if you can just get a little bit of focus on that, then it becomes a little easier to block out the other noise.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree on that. Did you apply your theory back to you buying a franchise?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I began to write the book, I realized I wasn't taking some of my own advice. And so I did. I went back through and I was like, okay, I even told my husband, I was like, okay, I'm talking about, leaving a lasting legacy. Like what kind of retirement do we want to plan for? And I'm like, and yet I haven't really sat down with you to say, like, where do we want to raise our grandkids? What is the lifestyle we want when we have grandchildren? And how do we want to retire? And that led us to, buy a different home, led us to move in a different direction and have that conversation. So as far as the franchise, I wrote the book far after that, but I do think the franchise decision, enabled this career that is more in alignment with my passion and purpose.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important. I mean, for what it's worth, in franchising, the strongest sales tactic for franchisors, I would say, over the last 5 to 8 years, has been the franchise broker network. Now,
Okay.
the issue that exists is a broker in franchising really sells based on commissions in the general sense. Not all of them, but I've seen it recently. We did a Meet the Z podcast, and they ended up with the right brand. They wanted to be in senior care. They both took care of their aging parents. Their parents passed away, and they're like, we're passionate about giving back to the senior community. And so they start that conversation with a franchise broker, and they say, this is what we're passionate about. And the broker come back and says, based on your personality and the outcomes you want, you should own a soccer brand or a donut brand.
Oh,
And
really?
they said, but that's not what we're looking into. And like in that scenario, they kept strong back to their passion and beliefs and ended up with the right brand. And to put it in comparison, the brand that they ended up pays $25,000 commission per deal. The donut brand pays $85,000 commission per deal, and the soccer brand pays 50. And
Wow.
so I think like the hardest part for franchising or for a younger folk to find good advice is sometimes advice can seem very trusting and real. But you almost have to have the ability to cut through the bullshit in order to not get fooled by someone giving you bad
Yeah,
advice, right?
that's interesting. I never even considered hiring a franchise broker. So that is very interesting. That's certainly a different factor to consider, just like when you buy a house or anything else, right? Like what's in it for them versus what's in it for you.
Well, I'll give another example. I went and had my annual physical yesterday. A year ago, I did my annual physical in Atlanta because that's where we lived, and now I live in Chicago. So now I have two different doctors, and same issue, two different opinions. The doctor in Chicago had different plan than the one in Atlanta. And so that's where like I'm able to hold on to my own governor at this point in life because I'm confident enough in myself to say yes or no to something.
Right.
But I'm bringing that up because I think that's where the magic of your framework works. Like you have to have that self-confidence because even like setting up a will, someone might give you one piece of advice versus another. But the whole point is if you've created your North Star, then the advice is irrelevant. You're holding on to your North Star.
Yes, it's interesting. One of the chapters in the book is having a winning team. And so that speaks to that very carefully because a lot of times people are surrounding themselves with the wrong experts or the wrong advisors. And so having a winning team is super important. Or sometimes you'll have people in your family or friends that are very negative and saying, you shouldn't do that. So I think a huge, I'm a big proponent of, you are the company you keep. And so I do ask the reader in that chapter to really take stock of who they're surrounding themselves with and do those people exemplify where they'd like to be going.
So it's a great point. So stay on the team aspect because obviously team can be your family supporting on your personal adventures to happiness, or your team can be those that work in business, or your team can be your community or your friends that are around you. So
that's right, all of it.
Yeah. If I think through our business and like if I zoom out, I'm very happy with how far we've come. 15 plus years, multi-million-dollar business, like all the scorecards are there. But over the last 5 years, we've hit this like plateau. And it shouldn't plateau because we've added innovation in. So the innovation should be impacting and growing the business. If I look very carefully and say, well, what's the issue? And it's twofold. It's me because I select the team, but it's the team that I've selected. And this year I tried doing something different. I called it Dream Catcher, and I said I want to understand what your dream is so that we could maybe align the outcomes in our business. And there's a guy that works at our company. If he watches this, he'll know exactly what it is. I said, what's your dream? It's very simple. I want to make more money for my family. I said, okay, well, the indicator to make more money for your family is you have to sell more business in, and we can have a beautiful commission structure. So that's at the beginning of this year, and you flash forward, there's nothing sold in. And so he comes back to the conversation of, well, I want to make more money. I said, great, but we got to go back to this other step. And you have to do X to get to your dream. And so sometimes when I'm looking at team and structure, the dream might be big, but the execution may be small. And so I'm all that to say, when you're evaluating someone on your team, how do you weigh the dream and how do you weigh the work ethic?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And I know we spoke about this on the last week on the call, but and I don't want to sound like an EOS cheerleader, but EOS has really helped us with this because it does force you to have very clear business model and data to analyze. But with the scorecards and the people analyzer, it's really great because we have to go through and you do have to do a people analyzer. And in the people analyzer, you have to say, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity for it? And the scorecards have to be in alignment with, what your 3, 5, and 10-year goals are. So for example, for us, I was setting some goals for the spas. And then I'd ask my general managers, I'd say, okay, are these goals even physically possible? Do we even have enough people in the spa, the customer demand to even meet these goals? And as you dive down into the metrics and the data a little bit more, strategically and microscopically, you realize, well, we do. And so I always joke that the book I'm going to write for EOS is Why and What If, because I'll say, okay, well, why aren't we getting to the numbers we want? And then what if we did this? So to answer your question specifically, if someone wants to make more money, we know that the company has to create this much more revenue and to the bottom line. And of that, we had 12 deals. And of the 12 deals, we need to move the needle by 12%. And how do we move the needle by 12%? We look at what the customer really wanted. And how do we get the customer to engage more? Is that a vertical, is that a vertical move for more revenue? So what I like about EOS, and it could be any system, but for us, that system has really, really forced us to look very, very closely at why and what if we did this. And so, it might not be for everyone, but it's been very eye opening for me to really look at that information.
If someone doesn't have it, want it, or have the capacity to do it, but they're a really nice person, how do you handle it?
They're gone. And that was the hardest thing, but we're all over it now. If you do not get it, so in EOS also there's a bar, and you decide how to set the bar on your core values. So you identify your core values, and then you do a plus, a minus, or a plus minus, whatever. And I don't want to get too in the weeds on that. But once you align your core values and you say, we're only going to allow for one plus minus, like our bar is set very, very high because it's very important to me. In my business that these that we have all these people in alignment. So we do the people analyzer, and then if we don't have alignment, we move them out. You have to have great people. You just do.
Yeah. I agree with you, and I would say again, like if I'm diagnosing our limit from going good to great, it is and it swings in another direction. In our business, we're working with clients.
Yeah.
If we say clients, what is the number one reason you would leave us? They would say, because I get a new account rep. And so even if I look at them, even if I said, well, what if I could bring in a better client rep who's going to give more value back for the same amount of money? They're like, yeah, that sounds good, but what about this person? And so it's like in our business, because of the hold on to stability, sometimes that is the tail that wags the dog. And we have to think about that to say, okay, our biggest client, if we made a change with insert person, how would that affect the business down below? But, again, like my first statement was 5 years of plateau. Maybe it's time to take some swings to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it always comes down to people, right? I mean, great people, but it's also leadership, and leadership something I'm really focused on right now is just trying to become the best, strongest leader I can, because if I can do that, then my general managers can do that, and then that trickles down to the other team members. But it really comes down. I mean, yes, you got to pay well for great people, but if you have great people, it really solves most all of the problems in the business. But it takes a little time to get, strategically there, financially there, to understand, okay, how do we even bring in these people?
Mm-hmm.
But the people analyzer has been really, really cool. And the accountability chart in EOS is really neat too, because you begin to look at like, oh, well, we need someone who's accountable for that. And that's caused us to restructure the way we, hire and the way we manage our teams. We realized right away we need a person in that position. So that's the other thing too, is you kind of, the gap and the gain. I think we talked about that last week. If you identify some of these gaps and you're able to fill them with a level 10 player, you're like, wow, these people really come in and they take charge. You're not trying to tell them what to do. They're coming in and saying, I already know what to do to help grow your company. And so when I hear you say, a plateau, for me, that means like you need fresh energy and ideas. You need somebody coming in with some fresh energy and ideas to kind of reinvigorate everybody.
Yeah. And I'll say, like, staying on the US topic, I think our biggest challenge is, and this is, it's the construct of the business. And I look at the end of the day, I have made a tremendous living on evaluating other businesses. So I know what I'm going to say is going to sound crazy, but because of my business and career DNA, I start off as a journalist. I start doing graphic design because the newspaper made me design the pages. I majored in news internet, so I had to learn how the internet and news work together. So you look at all these things, and so it comes up to, well, I'm a visionary for sure. Yeah. But I'm also playing integrator. And so because I'm playing both roles, that is what creates the plateau. And so who's the number two? Who's the person?
Right. That's why in EOS, the visionary cannot be the integrator.
Yeah.
And it's very smart of them. And that's also circles back to what we were talking about, like staying in your lane. Like you knew your lane. Your lane was journalism, media. Like you were in the lane, and but you were not afraid to pivot as new opportunities, or as you matured, or your interests or your skill set change. But you knew, sounds like early on, sort of who you were.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I know it. But finding it is a challenge. And ultimately I think on this next pivot, we'll have to look internally to find someone that wants to step up into that role and can really show that they're capable of doing it. So
Yeah, no, that's the exciting part about business. Like our oldest son just bought half of our construction company. He's 30. He's an entirely different person than he was at 24. And I'm having dinner with him last night. I'm like, my goodness, you have matured just dramatically. And it's so impressive. As a mom, I'm like, gosh, this is terrific. And now I'm turning 55. So I'm like, this is great, because I don't want to be doing this forever. I want to evolve with, in my life, as I become a grandma, or I do other things. I want to be able to embrace those different stages of life without a lot of stress and worry.
part of the theme of what I'm hearing you talk about on both of our conversations is really almost future casting and back casting. Like, you're looking into the future and then you're saying, okay, to get to this point at current pace, this is how long it's going to take. Or back casting, here's what I could do differently in my fake scenario to get me there faster. Are those your two superpowers?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a superpower, but it's funny. One of the chapters in my book is called "Happy Ending." It's not what you think, but it's time to start thinking about it. So it's just a little joke there. But to your point, that is the whole point of the future funnel, is that you sort of go through it, you sort of tunnel through your life, and then you go to the end of it, and you're like, I want it to end like this. This is what I want to leave my children. This is what I want to leave my grandchildren. This is my legacy that I want to leave behind in the world, to make it a little better than I found it. And then you got to your point, you got to go back and say, well, if I want to leave a piece of property to my grandchildren, or I want to have, a place where they can come and swim and play and ride a bike, then I have to change where I live, maybe, or I have to change when I retire. So to your point, that is sort of the secret sauce of the future funnel is, you got to go all the way through and look back at your life to figure out the steps you might need to take now, so that you can create a life that is reflective of you and your passion.
I want to take that answer and flip it back over to franchising, because I think there's a great insight in there too. I've talked with many franchisors, and they say, I have this franchisee and they're just such a pain in the ass. I say, go back to the signing of the agreement. Did you feel that way then? Well, no. I go, so you like them at that point. You were like, this franchisee is going to impact my business. I go, yes. I go, so take a moment. What would have to change? Go backcast. What would have had to change along the way? And they might say, they skimped on real estate, or there were real estate delays and it created X, or it caught. Okay. So you have two things that you can do with this backcasting tool. You can either work with this franchisee and say, look, we liked each other at one point. Let's try to reset. Or you take the insights and you cross-apply it to the next franchisee so you don't get it wrong.
That's right.
And so I think about like any failed business, any failed marriage, like a marriage at some point, a failed marriage started with an I do. And so
Right.
but some couples don't have the ability to backcast that moment and reflect on the combination of all these little things that cause it to go haywire. So theoretically, it's a great tool if people use it. I don't know, like my grandparents who are long gone, I don't know that they went through the process of thinking about legacy. And what one very financially strong, but I don't think at the end of his life he's like, wow, I could leave this to my grandchildren. So that wasn't enough. And then the other grandparents, I don't know that it ever entered their brain. I don't know in my parents' mind if they're thinking about like, what am I leaving from a legacy standpoint? And it's such a valuable thing for wherever you want to go in life or business, that it seems like everybody should go through this exercise.
Well, that's how I feel about it, but it wasn't until I started thinking about it, and it goes back to when I lived in Ohio. I'm born and raised in Ohio, third generation there, and I began to think about moving to South Carolina, where my husband's from, and where we knew we kind of wanted to retire, but we didn't really have a plan. And so it never occurred to me I could have a choice where I live. It seems so silly now, but it never occurred to me. I just thought I'd get married, have children, raise my kids, and do the same thing my parents did, right? And so, what I like to try to encourage people to do is see, like, it's your life, it's your style. What is your lifestyle? What what is it about where you live that you have passion for? And I write about this in the book because I was helping out a friend, and she had a business where she was recruiting doctors for a hospital, and she was trying to sell, the benefits of Dayton, Ohio to these doctors. And I was helping and I wasn't believing anything I was saying. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hate living here. Like, I don't even know why so I quit helping because I was felt disingenuous. But it's the first time I had really given thought to, do I love where I live? Do I love how I live? Um, and it's something sometimes, like I said, I call it the treadmill of life. We just get on it and we just kind of stopped. We don't stop to look around and think, do I really love where I
Yeah.
live? Is this reflective of who I am as a human being? And is this the legacy I want to leave? And I have 3 children now, married, and I want to be a good mentor to them, and a good role model in any way I can. And if I can help them in any way, or help any human beings in any way, to just try to live with more intention, I think that's really the goal.
Yeah, I think look at in franchising, it happens plenty where someone goes through the end of a career and says, I'm going to go own my own business. And so they become a franchisee.
That's right.
In life, it happens primarily towards the end to say, here's where I would like to retire. But it's interesting that along the ride, it's almost like you become complacent with the train ride that you're on.
Right.
You don't pull the string and say, I'm going to get off at this next stop. You just keep going
Until some life event happens to you, right?
Yeah, and sometimes that's too late. And I think that's where people that live this life end up having some form of regrets, because they look back, whether it's someone that worked too much and didn't spend time with their kids, or someone that didn't take the leap, always dreamt about being an entrepreneur, never took the leap. And so you have an ability, whether you're 1 or you're 100 right now, to change the outcome of tomorrow.
That's right.
And so that's where you don't have to go as big picture. I think the philosophical point of your book can drive change for tomorrow.
Yeah, just have a plan.
So,
The plan doesn't have to be a long range plan, but just have a plan and begin to think about, how you want to live your life. And then you're more proactive than reactive. And being proactive is exciting, because once you start saying, well, I know I want to retire by the beach, and we want to have let's say a vacation home or whatever it is, then you can start looking around at vacation homes. Well, that's kind of fun. And then it's like, well, how much can we afford? And should we put it on the rental market? Right. Once you just sort of have this idea, it gets exciting. And once you visualize something, it's easier to manifest something when you're actually visualizing it and taking action towards it. So it is kind of fun. And it doesn't have to be a huge plan. It could be a simple plan, like a vacation next year. It really doesn't matter. But when you begin to see it and add steps to take to get there, it just makes things more attainable, I think.
all right, I'll close with this. You've set your vision. What percentage are you out of it on the grand scale, and how close to it are you on a daily scale?
I'm doing pretty well, to be totally honest with you. It's been very intentional, though, and the from the beginning I used to work in the spa. I began to move myself remote, and then after moving remote, I began to implement systems to help work remotely. Then I hired people that I would like to take over the business when I retire. Then I moved to a property that was more reflective of how I want to live in retirement. And then I hired a wealth manager and an estate planner to help me set up trusts. And so I'm doing pretty good, actually. Proud of the work that I've done, to be honest. And I have a long way to go, and I'm never afraid to pivot or to change or try something new. But I mean, I love having intention to it because it's forcing me to get organized. I'm sort of an algorithmic person, as we talked about. So, but when you have a strategy and you can see the numbers and I can see the retirement and I can talk to people about it and I have a team around me that's helping me, it really is amazing how quickly things can come together for you.
Do you wish you would have put it in place at the start of franchising when you made this
Oh,
jump?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I wish I would have, woulda, coulda, shoulda. But now I can tell my kids at the same age, I wish I would have bought that rental property when you were born, because that's a great. So we're trying to set up our kids now to, have rental properties for their children. So it's great to learn and then also to be reflective of maybe missteps or things you wish you would have done, because now I take those and I can, impart those to my children and say, like, here, let me help you do something that I wish somebody would have helped me do.
Love it. Kimmy, great conversation. Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate
I
you.
really enjoyed talking to you, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Of course. For Kimmy, I'm Nick. Thanks for watching our exclusive interview. Take care.